Lesson 6, subtracting real numbers. It's my preference to go ahead and do Lesson 6 with Lesson 5 because they have so many similarities. And instead of talking about adding real numbers like we did in Lesson 5, we're going to talk about subtracting real numbers. So this is going to be pretty short, sweet, and to the point. First of all, two numbers with the same absolute value but different signs are called. Well, first of all, numbers that have the same absolute value have to be the same distance from 0. So for those numbers to be the same distance from 0, let's say that we're talking about the absolute value. Oops. Eventually I'm going to figure it out so that I don't forget my pen tool every time we get started here. Alright. So let's say that we're talking about the absolute value of x. We don't know what that is. And that its absolute value is 2. Well, numbers that have an absolute value of 2 have to be 2 units away from 0. So if I have 0 right here, this is 2 units away, and we know that this has to be 2. Well, we can also have 2 units on the other side. So we can go 2 units to this side, which is going to be -2. And we say that 2 and -2 are opposites. Okay? Another name is additive inverse. So if your book is asking you in a question what this is, they're probably going to be wanting additive inverse. So they tell us that the inverse property for addition for every real number a is that a plus its opposite, or its additive inverse, equals -a plus a, which is 0. They cancel each other out. They eliminate each other. So if I have 6 plus -6, again, that gets me 0. Rules for subtracting real numbers, they say to add its inverse. So here we have 3 minus 5, and instead of having to take 3 minus 5, they want us to add its inverse. So we change the negative, we don't change the negative, but we put a negative between them, and then we just go ahead and call it -5. Well, we know that when we're adding opposite signed numbers, we subtract them. So 5 minus 3 is 2. The larger absolute value here, I have an absolute value of 3 and an absolute value of 5. The larger absolute value is 5, which means that negative is going to be in my answer. So here we have some examples, and I have -13 minus 8. Well, these two numbers we could say have the same signs by adding its inverse. So if I put plus -8 instead of -8, when we have the same signs, we just add the absolute value. So the absolute value of 13 is -13, is 13. The absolute value of -8 is 8. 13 and 8 gives us 21. However, they're both negatives, so it has to be -21. Over here, we kind of have the same sort of situation. However, remember what I talked about in Lesson 5 about those double signs? 2 negatives, hopefully we know, gives us a positive. So this is like saying -32 plus 22. Well, they're opposite signed, which means we're going to subtract. So 32 minus 22 is going to give us 10. And the larger absolute value here, I have an absolute value of 32 or an absolute value of 22. The larger, of course, is 32. So we're going to say that we have to have that negative. So our answer here would be -10. I want you to go ahead and practice doing C and D. So please pause the video and we'll go over those in just a second. I want you to try it on your own first. Okay, so on problems like C, this is quite similar to problem B. I have the same sign twice here. I have a double sign. Those double signs, if I have 2 positives, that will give me two negatives, that will give me a positive. So I have 4.5 plus 8.2. That problem is pretty simple now. It doesn't look as ugly. So that would give us 12.7. final answer. And over here, again, we have these double signs. It's a double negative. A negative and a negative gives me a positive. Well, now I have a negative and a positive. They're opposite signs, which means I'm going to subtract them. When I subtract these two things, 6/7 minus 1/7 gives me 5/7. The greater absolute value here, though, is the 6/7, which is negative. So I have negative 5/7. For your homework this evening, I would like for you to do example 2 and example 3 on your own. So example 2 is just some more practice with the closure statements. And then example 3, I want you to have an answer for this tomorrow, and we will go over it in class.